I think we have time to look at Wanchai as well. This is the original seafront of Wanchai. Yeah. Queen's Road is running very close to the waterfront here. This is Queen's Road here. And Wanchai village is there. It's where the temple in Queen's Road is. The temple in Queen's Road is the descendant of a small earth god shrine. If you go into the temple in Queen's Road, you'll see a huge rock at the back. Now that rock is there before the British came, and there was a small shrine in front of the rock. It was an earth god shrine in front of the rock, and this shrine was worshipped by the fishing people. There were a few fishing boats that anchored in this bay, and they used this, they worshipped at this rock here, and there was a landing place there, just a little bit this side. As I said, this is was probably the village with probably only one family, and it was next to where the temple is. Very shortly after the British came, that shrine was rebuilt as a temple, certainly before 1845, but the village disappears. The village had a few fields in this area here. This is the earliest Wanchai, 1854. This area here, separating from the Bowring to stop the damage that typhoons caused. This led this area to be reclaimed for development here. But development in Wanchai comes much, much slower. By 1880, it has come here. This is, you can see here the prior here. It's Wanchai Road. And you can see the development as it had come by this time. This area had been developed for shop houses here. This area was developed for shop houses as well. And the central area, this area, was the main brothel area for low-class Europeans. Under the system in Hong Kong, there were 4 or 5 brothel areas in Hong Kong, divided by class and race. High-class Europeans had a brothel area along Lyndhurst Terrace in Central. Low-class Europeans, what the government used to call nicely European riffraff, their brothels were here. Chinese brothels for Chinese merchants were in Sai Kung, and brothels for coolies were in another area. It was a criminal offence to be found at night in an area other than the one to which you had the right to go. But this was the brothel area, designed basically for soldiers and sailors from the Navy. That was the brothel area there. That's Spring Garden Lane. So this shows how this area was developed. These were fields. The fields survived here until the 1850s. These were probably originally the fields of Wanchai village. Here you can see some of the European developers who have developed this area. This area, you can see a small area of private reclamation here. And then this developer had built, at huge expense, a series of small warehouses for rent. 16 small warehouses for rent. They were all built of granite, heavy granite, and in the advertisement it said 2-foot thick granite walls with steel doors, suitable for use as opium warehouses, which is an entirely respectable trade. But he didn't want to use them himself, he wanted to rent them out. He kept the end for himself, and there was a landing area and a private pier for them. But once he built them and spent a large sum of money on them, then the establishment of the barracks here meant that nobody wanted to rent them, and he went bankrupt. And much the same happens here. Here you can see the same area. This is the area with those go-downs, the warehouses for letting. After the man went bankrupt, the land reverted to government, and it was resold as a series of medium-sized lots. And the reclamation area here was sold as the same size lots, but a strip of lots along the edge of the hill were designed for very small-scale developers. In this area, interestingly, the developers were almost exactly 50-50 Chinese and European. So this one was owned by a European, this one was owned by a Chinese, this one was owned by a Chinese. So the area was mixed in ownership, but it was almost entirely Chinese as developed. This is the other side of the road from where we were looking at. We were just looking at this area here. This is the Stone Nulla Lane area that in that early period was fields. That gets developed about 1858 and entirely given over to shop houses. Apart from this building here, a building of the greatest historical interest about which we know very little, this is the Gwulo Hospital. Older than Dunghua. It's the first Chinese hospital in Hong Kong. It's built 18 months before the Dunghua Hospital here. The first attempt by the new Chinese community to build a significant charitable organization. Once Dunghua is established, all the money goes to Dunghua, and this rather suffers. It doesn't have much income, it changes its use, and it's demolished in the 1920s and replaced by the present building on the site, which is the blue building, which is being preserved. This is the Spring Garden Lane area in 1855, the original waterfront here. By 1855, the waterfront's about here. This is the government house, this one. And you can see here again a row of large warehouse buildings and residences with gardens facing onto Queen's Road and a footpath along the back. But it was all these buildings disappeared to be replaced by shop houses in due course. Causeway Bay was originally genuinely a bay here with two promontories either side. Jardines liked the look of this promontory. They bought it in 1841, and all this area was owned by Jardines here. This is the Jardines Point. And they developed the area at the door of their warehouse complex as a small town called Jardines Bazaar. And they build houses for their high-ranking officials, their taipans on the adjacent hill. So this is all Jardines, and it's the earliest development in the area. This area was originally the rice fields of Wanchai village. Wanchai village is here, but very, very early by 1845, it's been compulsorily acquired by the government and turned into a race course. Governor Bowring in 1859 decides to deal with it. He reclaims the bay here, making the Jardines Peninsula a little bit less of a spike and opening this area on the reclamation for development. Here's the racecourse here. These hills were left as undeveloped, mostly because of pressure from Jardines. They wanted the beautiful views from their high-ranking houses here to remain. And then this area here was mudflats predominantly. Originally, the road crosses the mudflat on a causeway, which is why it's called Causeway Bay. This is now Victoria Park.